Running a business comes with a lot of what-ifs. But luckily, there's a simple answer to them. Shopify. It's the commerce platform behind millions of businesses, including Thrive Cosmetics and Momofuku, and it'll help you with everything you need. From website design and marketing to boosting sales and expanding operations, Shopify can get the job done and make your dream a reality. Turn those what-ifs into... Sign up for your $1 per month trial at shopify.com/special offer.
It's The Other Side of Midnight with Frank Morano.
Just a small town girl living in a lonely world. She took the midnight train going anywhere.
This is The Other Side of Midnight. That's Journey. Don't Stop Believing. Seems like an apropos song this time of year, because as we close in on the election, and you hear people on the right and on the left with so much bitterness towards one another. God forbid you should disagree with someone. They're ready to have you stoned, excommunicated. They don't want to live near you. Forget about it. And it's interesting to me for a few reasons. One, because when you talk to people, they really all seem to believe in the stuff we learned about America as children, that America does, or at least is supposed to represent things like freedom, things like opposition to autocracy, things like democratic choices. And yet the animosity that has grown among people on the left and on the right is staggering. And it's staggering to me for a few reasons. I read an article in Axios the other day. The headline was, "Behind the Curtain, America's Shocking Agreement." And basically, it gets into all of the areas that Trump and Harris basically agree on. Stronger borders and tougher immigration laws, a tougher stance against China, not over-regulating AI, increasing domestic energy production, including fracking, supporting Israel and its wars, protecting IVF treatment, protecting more child care assistance to parents. We didn't even get into the agreement on no taxes on tips, opposing a national abortion ban, protecting Social Security and Medicare. Now, I know what Democrats are going to say about Trump. Well, he is not really for any of those things. And I know what Republicans are going to say about Harris. Oh, she's not really for any of those things. The point is, in spite of the fact that the supporters of Harris and Trump are seemingly ready to kill each other, in some cases literally, you have the two major candidates with their positions that they're articulating publicly, a remarkable amount of overlap. So I was fascinated by the opportunity to talk with Leigh McGowan. Not only is she one of the most influential influencers in the world of politics, where she's been doing her thing on YouTube and on the internet for about a decade now with PoliticsGirl, but she's got a new book out called A Return to Common Sense: How to Fix America Before We Really Blow It. And the key to this book and her approach is 6 principles that I think it's very difficult to disagree with. Leigh McGowan, thanks so much for joining me on the radio. Appreciate you staying up late with us.
Well, thanks for having me, Frank.
My pleasure. Leigh, before we get into your book, which I'm eager to do, you have a situation where I just listed a couple of the instances of Harris and Trump publicly agreeing, according to this Axios article. But the people, the voters, the supporters of Trump and Harris are more at each other's throats than ever. How do you explain that? I'm sure you've thought a lot about this. How do we get to a position where the candidates, at least publicly, agree on so many of the key issues, but their supporters are ready to kill each other?
Yeah, well, I think you said it well when you were talking earlier, where you said here are the things I think they agree on, and here are the things that people would say, oh, Trump doesn't believe any of that, or Harris doesn't believe any of that. And I would say I'm probably, because I really do wish for America's better angels to come around, I do believe that the American people, by general nature, agree on much more than we disagree on. But I think that the rhetoric, particularly, and I'm going to say on one side, has been jacked up so high that now you have one side talking about slitting your throats and bloodbaths and people are garbage and this kind of thing, and the other side reacting to that I feel like it's become increasingly hostile the closer we get to the actual election. Because I do think that there are people who are actually truly struggling right now under Republican policies in red states. I think more women around the country are very nervous and scared about their rights being taken away. I do think that we're in a position now where we're talking about rounding up people, and we haven't explained how that would be done, where the two sides would not agree on that.
Well,
that would not be a Harris position and a Trump position. That is simply a one-sided position. And that is unfortunately where we are now. And that's a hard thing to get around. So people are getting more and more nervous, I think.
So I don't want to get into a tit for that. This side did that. This side did this. And obviously, when it comes to Donald Trump, if you look at just over the last 3 or 4 days, some of the things that he said, it's very difficult to defend. The one thing I do want to push back a little bit is the notion, not just from you, but I hear this from a lot of people, that this only happens on one side. For instance, I retweeted a tweet from Governor Tim Walz the other day over the weekend saying all Donald Trump and J.D. Vance know about manufacturing is how to manufacture BS, although he actually says it. And I said, that's a very classy response from a man who'd like to be VP. And I thought that was very not in keeping with Tim Walz's personality, his affability, his likability. And the response that I got was, one gentleman writes me, "You're voting for Trump, right, you fat moron?" And another person writes, "Okay, go vote for a rapist." And it just leads me to think that the acrimony and the level of antipathy, it's not just on the right. I really do think it's on both sides. But do you disagree?
No, I mean, look, you're giving an example of both sides. If I read you the things that I get daily being a woman online talking about literally common sense political issues, the amount of people who tell me really truly heinous things daily, hundreds and hundreds of people, I would say probably you're going to find, saying the only thing they can manufacture is BS, to me is just a funny tweet. It's not like go die in a hole and, I see what you're saying. It's not that I don't understand your point. I don't think that these sides are equal.
All right, fair,
and I think
fair
that
enough.
We're at a point now where, like you're saying, the things that Trump is saying now, that he's ratcheting up, that he said today on the Sunday shows, is not something you can easily defend. And then you have people like General Mark Milley, who worked directly for him, who was his head of Joint Chiefs of Staff, saying there is no mincing words. The man's a fascist and we're in danger if he comes to power. And I think that's what you're feeling from people right now, particularly on the left. But the reason I wrote my book in the first place was because I wanted to get back to a place of common sense.
Right.
I wanted to get back to some common ground. But I think as we're 25 days out from the election, I think people are genuinely concerned that we might put an actual criminal rapist back in the White House. So I think people are amped.
Well, at 30 minutes after the hour, this is The Other Side of Midnight. My guest is Leigh McGowan. I don't want to parse words too much in that the difference between civil judgments with sexual assault versus criminal convictions, but we can go back and forth on that for an hour or so. Let me ask you though about the fundamental aspect of your book and the work that you've been doing with a return to common sense. I mentioned this situation where opinion polls show they don't want to date someone of the opposing political party. I know a lot of people that have moved from places like New York and New Jersey to places like Florida, and a lot of them move because of the weather, but a lot of them say they're moving because of the political climate. And you do have a situation, and this is reflected in the polls, where folks don't even want to live next to people that have a differing political viewpoint. I think that's really sad and very frightening. In your opinion,
Yeah.
how do we get people talking again, Leigh?
I think, Frank, to your point, I think that we have to stop talking about it like it's politics. I think where we are right now, I think if we were talking politics, we would be talking what Liz Cheney talked about, what Adam Kinzinger talked about, what Dick Cheney talked about, what, McCain talked about. Those would be Republicans that could talk to Democrats, and we'd be talking about political issues. I think where we are right now with people not wanting to date someone from from a different political party, it's because the MAGA movement has taken over the traditional Republican Party. So I don't think we're talking about politics anymore. I don't think it's about politics. I think it's about morality. It's about how you want to live your life. It's about who you deem as a real person who has value, who doesn't have value, whose lifestyle you want to emulate or not emulate. So it becomes less about politics and more about values and morality. And I think when you date someone or when you marry someone or if you live next door to someone, you would hope that your morality and your opinions of the world and which people count and which people don't count would line up. So I don't think it actually has to do with politics. As far as getting us back to a place of commonality, of common ground, it's exactly why I wrote the book. It's why I started the project in general. I started the PoliticsGirl project as a response to no one in my life really caring about politics. I mean, as I understand it, you're someone that really cares about local politics and you really spend a lot of time with it. So you probably understand what I'm saying when I say that when I would talk about politics with my friends, and I'm talking about a decade ago, people's eyes would just glaze over. They just didn't want to talk about it. And, that's understandable. What have we been told not to talk about our whole lives, right? Politics and religion. And what are the two things that cause us the most problems? Politics and religion, right?
Yeah.
So we don't know how to speak about it. We don't know how to talk about it. And I found that I didn't think that was because people weren't interested. It was just because we just checked out of it. We were like, that's not for me. I'm going to put politics over there, and I'm just going to go about living my life. And I think the thing is that we were so busy living in a democracy that we forgot that we had to work on our democracy. And we even forgot how our democracy works. So I thought I would write a book that not only explained that, that laid out basic civics knowledge. The first 20 pages are America 101, how our laws are made, the three branches of government, all the things you would have learned in Schoolhouse Rock or in, 8th grade American history. But also then moving forward to what you were talking about before, what I call these 6 American principles, where I thought no matter where you sat on the political spectrum, whether you were a Republican, a traditional Republican, an independent, a Democrat, you would agree, make America, America, right? And I wanted to have somewhere where we could start from a common ground and use these 6 things. Say number 1, principle 1 is America is a land of freedom. I think most people in America would agree with that fundamental principle. And the 6th one is, government should be a force for good. And I thought if we could use these 6 things, we could not only use them as a, guidepost to get us out of this mess we're currently in, but also as a lens to kind of consider things moving forward.
If folks are just tuning in, I'm Frank Morano. This is The Other Side of Midnight. My guest is Leigh McGowan. Her new book is A Return to Common Sense: How to Fix America Before We Really Blow It. And Leigh, I want to go through these 6 principles if we can. But the thing that you just alluded to, how your book begins with a civic lesson, I think this is the one thing that there shouldn't be any disagreement about on the left, on the right, people in the center, that we as a country really need to prioritize civics education. And yet I am looking at school curriculums all over the country, and civics is almost kind of a throwaway. It's almost an if we get to it subject in schools. You'd agree clearly that needs to change, right?
Absolutely. If I could champion one thing in America, it would be to bring proper civic education back to American schools.
All right. Let's go through some of these principles that you lay out here. One of your principles is that government should be a force for good. We have a lot of listeners who are on the right. Many people on the right fear that too much government intervention can lead to overreach and a loss of personal freedom. How do you balance the need for effective government with maintaining individual liberties?
I think when I'm talking about with America, government should be a force for good, it's fundamentally this idea that what traditional Reaganism was a classic Reagan joke was the 9 most scary words in the English language are I'm from the government, I'm here to help, right? And I feel like Reagan did us a disservice with that comment, because it feels like if you're at the head of the government and you're saying the worst thing you could have is the government in your life, then I don't know what you want to do in government. I think if you decide to go into government, you decide to be a civil servant, which is what they are supposed to be, or decide to work for the people, then you really should be there to make people's lives better. And I would hope that most people, wherever they sat on the political spectrum, would want that. And that's in things like making sure that our drinking water is safe, making sure that our roads are cleared if there's snow, those kind of things that we forget government does, making sure your lights in your town line up so you're not constantly hitting a red light. That's actually government. People forget that. And I think we would all want to have a government that was working in our best interest. Now, as far as civil liberties, I find it interesting that we talk about the right and the left, and the right is for getting government out of your life, when the current right of the party is unfortunately the party that is right now telling us what books we can read, and if we can have abortions, and if we're allowed to have our own healthcare decisions, and who we can love, and what we can teach, and what our teachers can talk about in their classrooms. It feels like the party of personal responsibility, the party of small government, who I can respect and understand, is now the party that is in everybody's in their lives. And I think that most of us would like to have the government regulate things so that we were safe, so we had the access to freedom, so we could live our lives freely. We could say, I can live in this neighborhood and be safe. I can send my children to a good school. I can go to, in some places, with insecurity. But I don't want the government in every part of my life. And I certainly don't want them telling me what book I can read and what my teacher can say and what we can do. Because if you can pick what the teachers can teach from state to state, which goes back to why I think we should have a national civics education, then, I learn California facts, but you learn Florida facts, and really there are just facts. And I think that we should get back to a place like that.
Fellas, Degree Cool Rush deodorant, right? Well, last year they changed the formula, and guys were mad about it. One dude even started a petition. So guess what? Degree heard us, admitted they messed up, and brought the original Cool Rush scent back exactly how it was. And it's in Walmart, Target, and other stores now for under $4. So grab some and remember why its cool, crisp, and fresh scent made it the #1 men's antiperspirant for the last decade. Degree Cool Rush is back, and it smells like victory for all of us.
Shopping is hard, right? But I found a better way. Stitch Fix online personal styling makes it easy. I just give my stylist my size, style, and budget preferences. I order boxes when I want and how I want. No subscription required. And he sends just for me pieces, plus outfit recommendations and styling tips. I keep what works and send back the rest. It's so easy. Make style easy. Get started today at stitchfix.com/Spotify. That's stitchfix.com/Spotify.
Holiday presents, in the red corner, the undisputed, undefeated Weed Whacker Guy. Champion of hurling grass and pollen everywhere. And in the blue corner, the challenger, extra strength Holiday. Eye drops that work all day to prevent the release of histamines that cause itchy allergy eyes. And the winner by knockout is Holiday. Holiday, bring it on.
Get ready for Universal Epic Universe, featuring the wizarding world of Harry Potter, Ministry of Magic, and Super Nintendo World. Now open at Universal Orlando Resort. Tickets and packages on sale now at universalorlando.com.
So one of the other areas that you focus on is election integrity. You emphasize that every citizen should have a vote, and that vote should count. One concern from the right is ensuring the integrity of elections. How do you propose that we safeguard the voting process, which people have very real concerns about? I hear about them regularly, while making sure that it remains accessible for everybody?
Sure. I mean, look, when we talk about having a civics education in general, I would love to see civics education in all American schools. And if you graduate from American high school and you pass American civics, you get a voter registration card. And then every child that graduates high school in America gets a voter registration card. And that would be counting as your ID. And you would not only know how the government works, but we would know that you went through the system. I think that would be a wonderful way to do it, because I do think that this idea that we can stop people from voting or limit people from voting, it's not a very American idea. Quite frankly, you should get a voter ID card as soon as you turn 18. It should just be part of what happens. The day you're born, you get a number, if you're born here in America, and when you turn 18, you get a voter ID card. I don't know why we've made it quite so complicated. I could tell you why I think we made it quite so complicated, because I think it does benefit certain people to have less people vote. And I keep telling people that if you are a voter in America and you are living through something like partisan gerrymandering, whether that's from the right or the left, or you're living through something like limiting the drop boxes in your state, like in Ohio, or you're living through something like closing the amount of polling places, like in Georgia, it might seem like it would benefit you if it seems that your party is making those choices. But ultimately, it doesn't, because if you are allowing voters to be disenfranchised, even if those are voters you would prefer didn't vote, you are a voter. And if you are allowing the government to disenfranchise people, ultimately you're allowing the government to disenfranchise you. Because any voter that is disenfranchised doesn't benefit anybody.
Yeah, no, I could tell you in New York, where Andrew Cuomo and the state legislature made it impossible for third parties to even maintain a spot on the ballot. It's very demoralizing to people that want to participate. All right.
Sure.
One of the other principles that you talk about is, and you've alluded to it here, is America being a land of freedom and opportunity. Right-leaning Americans value economic freedom and, as you just mentioned, personal responsibility. How do you reconcile those values with your belief that government should play a significant role in people's lives?
In what way do you think that I say government should play?
Well, I feel like that government should be a force for good. The implication of that is a larger government rather than a smaller government.
I would say a more responsible government. I don't think we need 100,000 layers of government. I mean, originally, I don't know if people know this about me, but I'm an immigrant. I came from Canada, and I am an American citizen now and have been since 2008. But I come from Canada, which has things like universal health care. So you get into an accident in Canada, you're not worried about not being able to afford it. You're not worried about the ambulance. You're just worried about getting better. I think those are wonderful things that the government can do. But I also know that it's a broken system. I lived through it. I know that. I know that there are 50,000 layers of government if you want to get a subway station built, and it'll take you up 14 layers of government. Government can be oppressive and too big. So it doesn't mean that it cannot be too big, but government being a force for good and government being in our lives. I'm talking about things like OSHA rules to make sure you're safe in the workplace. I'm talking about setting a minimum wage to make sure people have a livable wage. I'm talking about protecting people's rights. These are things that the government should do. If there's a pandemic, they keep you safe. If there is a terrorist attack, they can protect you. Those kind of things, that's government in your life. I don't mean government needs to be in every single step of your life, and I certainly don't want the government telling me what to read, how to raise my child, who I can marry, those kind of things. I don't believe the government has any right there.
Yeah, I mean, the pandemic is just one example where, I feel like there's a little bit of a tension between freedom, where people wanted to do things like keep their business open or go to church, and the government was literally prohibiting them from doing that. I mean, that struck me as a bit of a dichotomy.
Yeah, no, and I can see why people would think that. That's a logical argument. I think we also have to remember that it was a once-in-a-lifetime pandemic, and no one knew what to do. No one knew how serious it would be. One side was saying one thing, one side was saying another. And I think in those kind of situations, it's unfortunate that we demonize the scientists, because most of us don't know about virology. Most of us don't know about bacteria. Most of us don't know about viruses. I do know that, the government did have a working plan for a pandemic, and that entire department was scrapped when the Trump administration came in. So perhaps we could have been better prepared for a rising pandemic like this, because it was set up on the bird flu and on those kind of things. But we got rid of that entire department, maybe to cut down on government. But that was an unfortunate forced error on the administration's part, because there is a reason. I can totally understand some of my favorite businesses closed during the pandemic, people that just couldn't afford to stay open, mom and pop shops. That broke my heart. And I totally understand where people are coming from on that. And yet, when you don't understand something and the entire world is shutting down, I think people err on the side of caution. I remember when we had the quote unquote Ebola crisis, where there was a person from overseas who came over that had Ebola, and they shut down an entire, city block, basically, right? Because you don't know. You're like, oh, shoot. Well, I would rather err on the side of caution to protect our citizens rather than be like, oh, my gosh, we let this thing get completely out of control. So I think, in hindsight 2020, I'm sure that people would do things differently. But this is the case. You know, we had the Trump administration was in charge then, and I think they did what they thought they needed to do.
One of the best areas that I think there could be common ground in terms of what you lay out in your book is the idea of national pride. And based even on what you've said in the few minutes that we've spoken, you mentioned the ideals of America being worth saving. A lot of folks on the right feel a deep sense, not that I am claiming to be an ambassador for any political movement, people on the right or any other people, but I think have an understanding because I hear from them on a daily basis. But many on the right feel a deep sense of pride in American history and values. I'm curious, what do you think the left can learn from the right, if anything, in terms of appreciating America's founding principles, like the importance of things like self-governance, of patriotism, and things of that nature?
Well, I don't think the left has necessarily anything to learn from the right in that department, because I don't think the right holds the mantle of patriot any more than we do. I'm definitely, as much as I like to say that I'm not a Democrat, I'm just a liberal. I am liberal, so the Democratic Party lines up closer to what I believe. I'm a common sense person, but I'm an immigrant that would 100% unapologetically call herself a patriot. And most people I know that would call themselves Democrats or liberals would also call themselves patriots. I think that one of the best things about this country is that we probably have so much in common in that department,
right,
that we all love this idea of independence and fighting for our independence and self-governance and the kind of government we set up with the Constitution. I think one of our biggest problems is that we just stopped evolving as a nation. The Constitution was set up in a way that was supposed to grow with us, right? That's why we have the amendments. It's why we were supposed to change over the years. The founding fathers knew that we would grow and change as a nation, and the Constitution would need to change with us. It's how we got the Bill of Rights. It's how we got the 15th Amendment to give the Black people the vote. It's how we got the 19th Amendment to give women the vote. We kept growing as a nation. We evolved. As the country grew, so did we. And then in the 1970s, we just stopped evolving. We stopped creating amendments. We stopped making change. And if you think about any evolution, if you don't evolve, you die. And I think right now America's in a real crisis because it stopped growing with itself. I mean, the founding fathers didn't know we would have airplanes, let alone, AI. And we have stopped evolving to meet the times. And I think that's why we're seeing a real struggle right now.
One of the things that right-leaning Americans often talk about is American exceptionalism, the idea that America has a unique role and responsibility in the world. How does your message of common sense civics fit with the idea of American exceptionalism? And can we find common ground left and right on that?
I actually think that America would be so much better off if we stopped saying we're the greatest country in the world and started trying to be it. I think we have a lot to learn. And I think one of the best things that we could have got from the internet is that we can now see how so many other countries live, that we can see how they're living in the Scandinavian countries. We can see the healthcare in South Korea. We can see what they're doing in England. We can watch how they're doing it in Canada. And we can see that there are people living in different nations. You see a lot of people moving overseas these days because they say my life is just better in Spain or Portugal or Denmark or wherever. And we can sort of recognize that there's different ways of doing things and people have a higher quality of living in different countries. And perhaps America should look at itself for a second and say, we're not doing so great right now as a nation. We're divided, we're angry, we're frustrated, we feel left behind. We are not having this American dream experience that we were promised where if we just work hard enough, we're going to make it. What happened? What's going on? And instead of blaming each other, we should maybe look outwards and say, what have other countries done that perhaps we could learn from? Oh, look at all these countries that have universal health care. Can we take some of their best elements and give it to ourselves? Look at all these countries that have better systems for their children growing up, where you have paid family leave or you have time off with your children when you have them. Maybe we could learn something from that. So I think that this idea of American exceptionalism, that we are this amazing nation that needs to teach other people, that maybe that time has waned. And maybe as Americans, we could say, we love it here, but maybe we could make it better. What can we learn from other nations now that we're this global world? that could really make us this greatest country on earth that we tell people we are.
Leigh, I have to ask you about this before we run out of time here. You've built a large following by engaging people on social media, which is often criticized for increasing political polarization. A lot of folks on the right feel that the mainstream media, and especially platforms like TikTok and YouTube, they tend to lean a little bit left. And I'm sure folks on the left view entities like Twitter as equally negative, if not more so. How do we tackle the issue of media bias and ensuring that all voices are heard fairly in today's political conversation, whether we're talking conventional media, whether we're talking social media? Because I noticed one of the things that President Trump and Vice President Harris have been doing is basically going out of their way to go on podcasts, not where they're going to be faced with adversarial, challenging questions, but where they're going to be interviewed by people largely that agree with them. I mean, I know there's a couple of exceptions with that, but it's really only a couple. Where do you view the polarization, social media issue and the media bias issue these days?
I think that the biggest problem we have right now is that facts themselves are now considered leftist. So that in itself is a problem. I think we need to get back to a fairness doctrine like we had in the 80s, but for the new millennium, one that addresses our new social media environment, that addresses our new cable news environment, that addresses, what we used to have at radio, then we had television, and then we had these rules about how you could express things. And if you gave one side a platform, you had to give the other side a platform. And when we got rid of a fairness doctrine, it gave birth to one-sided radio, one-sided television. It was sort of the birth of a lot of things that now polarize us. And I think we should probably consider getting back to some sort of, and here's where I sound like I love big government, but some sort of legislation that allows truth to be truth, because there are truths and there are lies, and the public deserves to know the difference. And I think it is essential that we are not allowed to lie to the public for profit and power, whether that's from the left or from the right. And there has to be some sort of, whether it is financial ramification, broadcast license ramification, to lying to people for profit and power. And I do think that we can decide what facts really are because they exist. We can't say 98% of people agree, scientists agree that climate change is real and it's happening and it's man-made and we need to address it. And then have the 2% be like, well, I get equal time. I think we need to be able to establish what facts are and move forward from that. It's, the people in Springfield, Ohio, were not eating the cats and the dogs. That is not true. And we need to be able to say that is not true. And we stop repeating it, whether that's on social media, on cable news, or on regular television. And I think that would help the people a lot because people deserve to believe their president. They deserve to believe their leaders. They should be able to trust their news station. And if we are allowed to lie to them, whether that's from the left or the right or on social media, then that just leaves us in two different realities. And there's no way to come back from that.
Leigh, a lot of other things I'd love to go over with you based on your book and based on what you just said there. But unfortunately, we're out of time. I'm hoping we can chat again in the future. I enjoyed the conversation very much.
Me too. And I really do hope we can get back to a place of common sense and common ground because I do believe Americans want to be together.
You could check Leigh McGowan out online. Her website is PoliticsGirl.com. And the book is A Return to Common Sense, How to Fix America Before We Really Blow It. Leigh McGowan, thanks so much.
Thank you, Frank.
Thank you. If you want to comment on any portion of our conversation, you could certainly give me a call, 646-720-0635. That's 646-720-0635. This is The Other Side of Midnight. Straight ahead.